Greetings fellow Tarnished. This lore video has exceeded my expectations, and so for those who have been kept waiting, I apologize. You will find that the story is split into different sections, so if you wish to return for specific details, and not the full retelling, your navigation is made easier. Before we begin, I kindly ask you to please remember to like, subscribe and ring that bell of awakening. If you wish to support the channel, then methods on how to can be seen at the end. With all that out of the way, sit back, relax, and welcome to the lands between. From the might of one man, law and order was carved into the lands between. With both hammer and chisel guided by grace, the end result was golden. The warrior turned lord swore a vow that meant the suppression of his bloodlust. To quell the brute, he had to take upon a beast. The vassal turned vessel was Serosh, who acted as counselor to the golden lineage. However, the battle was not over, and this man now, God, had many more wars to win. He led the war against the giants. He faced the Storm Lord alone. And then, there came a moment when his last worthy enemy fell. And it was then, as the story is told, that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. The loss of light was quick to dull gold. Champion of the Tarnished, he and his kin were hounded from the capital. Then began the long march, with their destination awaiting them across the fog and over the perilous seas. These events are far removed from the current plight of the lands between, and yet the weight of the wanderers still remain. Within a sullen land that is burdened by a perpetual atmosphere of grief and loss, lies a hidden hole now inhabited by the ill-conceived. Stood atop a pile of porous amber is a scaly misbegotten, and on their person they hold a worn weapon. A rusty anchor wielded as a weapon. Each of its 4 flukes is thick and sharp, enabling piercing attacks. While the Tarnished left the lands between with their lord, one boat alone was said to have been left behind. Within the territory of Morn is where ships were once moored. Traces of this harbor still remain, littering the western coast. The ships that set sail were quickly sunk, their splintered pieces washing ashore. Furthermore, along the water's edge there are the remnants of platforms, once serving as piers. Also accompanying them are countless piles of rope, sacks of supplies and rotting lifeboats. The shambling sailors suggest when the destruction occurred. Since the shattering of both ring and royalty, death has become a lost art. So now for many, they are doomed to wander eternally until order is restored. It was during the war that I believe this dock was decimated. Ships and sails were shattered, with no stone left unturned. In times of old, but also of forgotten peace, I believe it was here that Godfrey and his kin set sail and left the lands between. The location of the rusted anchor solidifies this theory. Limgrave is a lush expanse of the Tenebrae domain. This region and its connecting peninsula is far south of the Erd Tree, and yet grace still managed to pierce the ever-clouded skies that envelop this land. The one who enabled this was Godfrey, with his influence still crowning the Pale Lands. Inside of Stormvale there awaits a picture to the past. The painting depicts a mountain top sporting no castle. The only structures that can be seen are the Divine Tower and its bridge. However, even in this portrayed landscape, they are both already old and weathered. Another important detail is the Erd Tree or lack thereof. Grace did not guide the hands of those who built these ancient megalithic structures, but it would go on to build something else. Before we discuss construction, we first need to address consumption. The description of root resin states that the roots of the Great Tree were once linked to those of the Erd Tree, and it is for this reason catacombs are built around Great Tree roots. If we are to take this as fact, then it would appear that the roots of the Erd Tree wove their way through the pre-dug tunnels that were laid out by its predecessor, and that for some time they were linked, with the Erd Tree benefiting from this subsystem. Within the far inner reaches of catacombs, bodies embracing roots can be seen. These have been granted burial, their decomposing bodies acting as sustenance for the Erd tree. Through this fleshy fertilizer the Erd tree began to sprout, with the sapling then being depicted on those that worshipped the shining successor. Blue surcoat draped over chainmail. The tree insignia emblazoned on the front depicts the Erd tree and is a design beloved throughout the lands between. The more modern depictions, post and pre-shattering, display the Erd tree in full blossom, creating a cross that harbors the Elden ring, this being a stark contrast to the budding bulbs that are yet to emit the glorious gold. The tree surcoat tells of its design being beloved throughout the lands between, this meaning that all those who might oppose such prosperity and peace were removed. And it was during one such removal that I believe the painting was captured. As stated within the Elden Lord crown, the age of the Erd tree began amongst conflict. Godfrey first led the war against the giants, then he went on to face the Storm Lord alone, before finally, later felling his last worthy enemy. Both the Storm Lord and the mentioned last worthy enemy, I believe to have resided in what is now known as Limgrave. The name Limgrave is up for debate as it either represents the state or purpose of the southern region. The definition of liminal reads, relating to a transitional or initial stage of a process, with it also meaning occupying a position at or on both sides of a boundary or threshold. This perfectly aligns with the journey of a tarnished who has been beckoned by grace. By traveling across the fog and into the lands between, they have begun the initial stages of their journey, now finding themselves occupying a boundary. An alternative way to interpret the name Limgrave is a much more literal one. The practice of grafting is a process where tarnished are separated from their limbs, with the region then quickly becoming their grave. The topic of grafting is to be continued with later, but any who turn to that taint will never earn themselves the honor of the title, hero, and it is the resting place of heroes which indicate Limgrave's former name. Inside of the tomb the dead remain restless, with the shades of the exiled attacking any who enter. These are soldiers who were sent to the penal colonies, and were required to keep their faces hidden, with the color red perhaps indicating their transgressions. However, they aren't the only ones within the grave, cloaked in obscurity. Knelt over a corpse that holds a primordial power is the shade of a banished knight. His helmet reads, "This helm was worn by knights who, whether by misfortune or misdeed, were forced to abandon their homes." Perhaps the deep red scarf was used to block the winds, for on the outskirts, the winds bite with a stinging fierceness. Banished knights appear in multiple locations, either in flesh or spirit. Similar to the exiled, the color of the scarf could indicate their crime, and what better place to banish criminals than the far southern reaches of the continent. The mention of the scarf aiding as protection from the biting winds could too indicate that the region later known as Limgrave was one such penal colony, as in those days the winds of the storm still raged with fury. This theory is aided via the description of the banished knight's shield. The shield reads, "A tall medium-sized metal shield, given to knights who, whether by misfortune or misdeed, were forced to abandon their homes." Most of these knights were sent to the fringes, where they were forced to start anew with only despair for company. One who did not need the protection from the biting bitterness of the outskirts winds was banished knight Oleg, one of the two knights known as the Wings of the Storm. After his banishment, he attracted the notice of the grace-given Lord, and later, having slain 100 traitors as the Lord's hand, Oleg earned the hero's honor of Erd tree burial. The ashes of Oleg are located within the fringe folk hero's grave, but where is his counterpart? Situated at the northeast side of Agil Lake, the once peaceful resting place for fallen heroes is no longer peaceful at all. The warden of this grave is a former gladiator, and it's he who cradles Ash. Ashen remains in which spirits yet dwell, used to summon the spirit of Engvall, the banished knight. One of the two knights, dubbed the Wings of the Storm. Despite his banishment, he rejected the invitation of the grace-given Lord, instead keeping watch over a masterless castle for many years, gaining renown as a hero of the fringes. The mentioned grace-given Lord, I believe to have been Godfrey, and the rejected invitation was a proposal to leave with Godfrey, now that he had become tarnished. Even at this point in history, the region was still referred to as the Fringes, with the name Limgrave only coming into existence sometime after Lord Godfrey's departure. Returning to the painting, the reason for the Erd tree not being depicted is because I believe it was yet to fully grow. Only those close to the capital could have seen this blossom, as it is the things that bloom who tell us of this time. A golden-tinged flower from a succulent plant that blooms on the Altus Plateau, said to be a funeral flower in an era long past, before the Erd tree grew. The Divine Tower and Bridge aren't the only indication of past civilizations. Along the shores of the western coast can be seen the crumbling columns that once connected to the peninsula. Even during the time of Godfrey, these intricate archways failed to reach the adjacent landmass. To combat this trench, a bridge was built, and it is this bridge which is the key to understanding the foundations of the Fringes. Although basic, the architecture of the bridge perfectly matched Stormvale, with the outlining sandstone brick mirroring Stormvale's golden trimmings. Further on down the cobbled path is a castle guarded by gigantic walls. These two I believe to have been built by Godfrey, with them later being besieged by their own maker. Godfrey killed many who disgraced the guidance of gold, however he did not allow blood to blind him of opportunity. Those who he conquered, he subdued and forced into his service. We cannot know of the numbers, but they were presumably in the hundreds or thousands, as to build a castle such as Stormvale takes an unimaginable amount of power, man or otherwise. Found within Stormvale is a weapon crafted from the misery of menials, with the maker of this cubic construct going on to corral the conquered. A weapon made from an ordinary stone brick, wielded by a laborer who led a rebellion and later became a champion himself. Even among other bludgeons of its size, this weapon is especially weighty. The strength of a giant is required to wield it. Godfrey's response to this treachery was a proposal that would restore lost honor. Under the orders of his new lord, Oleg dealt with the disturbance. But all was not accounted for, as there remained one, a lone surviving champion. Outside of Castle Morn, a monument mentions the unnamed. The siege of Castle Morn, a lone hero fights for his vengeance, only to fall at the hand of Lord Godfrey. The suppression of his people and the colonization of their home filled the subdued laborer with oceans of anger and regret. He stirred a rebellion in hopes to uproot the invader, with his leadership transforming him into their champion, and later, loss would make him into their hero. The weapon he carried was forged from those who shared in his pain. Its weight did not outmatch their misery, and together, binded by grief, they would attempt to slay their sworn enemy. But neither in life or in death could they overcome the crown, and were quickly laid to rest. The grafted blade great sword became the storied sword of Castle Morn, and the lone hero was buried with honor, the calm waves helping to wash away their anger. Godfrey was an unmatched conqueror, but beneath his rage was a shred of respect to those who he deemed worthy. This trait would continue when grace would no longer guide him, with the armor of champions only being reserved for those who had slaughtered countless foes. The importance of the painting is paramount, as during this period there was already a monarch of the mountain. This was the Stormhawk King, Lord of the Storm, who Godfrey faced, alone. Ashes of a hawk revered by all others as sovereign back in the days, when Stormvale's winds still raged like no other. This ancient monarch is proud, however, refusing to answer anyone's summons. Godfrey slew this ruler of winds, and then went on to subdue his subjects. Spirit of a Stormvale war hawk, the talons of which have been sliced off, so that razor-fine swords could be grafted in their place. With its lord vanquished, and its wings wounded, the hawk perished as it solemnly gazed at its former home. The storm is a war hawk's cradle. We've established that Godfrey respects those who he deems worthy, and I believe that it is for this reason that the castle acquired its name. When traversing the mountain, high and terrible winds envelop any traveler who dares climb. The storm creates a veil so thick that one could become easily lost. Godfrey's respect did not end there. Battle axe designed to resemble a hawk, with its wings comprising the blade. Signature weapon of warriors who strive to remain one with the storm, despite being so far from their place of birth. Their hearts are proud, and thereby easily undone. Godfrey and his armies were indeed far from home, but their bravery was rewarded with power. Like those who came, before they would go on to control the currents. The peak of the mountain is where the storm was most vicious, and when it thundered, lightning followed. Continuing with warrior's honor, the iron visage of the Stormhawk proudly spreads its wings, fastened to wooden barricades and walls. These exact designs can be seen within Morn, helping to further indicate that both holds were built during the same period. It is a common belief that the mentioned Stormlord is more human than beast, and it is they who are responsible for Stormveil's construction. I have already presented counter-arguments via the importance of respect and advertised honor in reference to Godfrey, but there are more concrete observations to be made. Within Dark Souls 3, the Cathedral of the Deep once had a different purpose before it came to be replaced. Inside the cathedral are statues of old, obscured by the new. This suggests to the player that there is a layered past. For Stormveil, there are no relics relating to a mysterious humanoid Storm Lord, no obscured statues, no hidden scriptures, no converted church. The Chapel of Anticipation and the ruined site of Merica should suggest the castle's age and original intent, as they too do not appear in the painting. In modern times, the Chapel of Anticipation is where those beckoned by grace shall appear. A woman with an open palm is who the tarnished shall awaken beneath, and it is she who frequents sites of faith. She and other maidens can be seen attending to others all around Stormveil, with the container in which she cradles being the key to her identity. A talisman depicting a special blessing of the Erd Tree slightly raises maximum HP, stamina, and equipment load. It is said that when the age of the Erd Tree began, such blessings were personally bestowed upon their recipients by Queen Merica herself. Through this blessed boon, those healed were harmonized, their faith fortified. The carvings who cradled the vessel of vitality represent the long-faded age of plenty. Talisman depicting a drop of the Erd Tree's sap, a blessed boon, gradually restores HP. It was once thought that the blessed sap of the Erd Tree would drip from its boughs forever, but that age of plenty swiftly came to a close, and with time, the Erd Tree became more an object of faith. And it is faith that kept the fringes from falling. Once his lord had left, Engvall safeguarded the storm. Through his efforts he became a hero, and it's his portrait who I believe can be seen hanging. There is not much known during the time of Engvall, but after his death Stormveil would eventually find a new monstrous master. The Elden Ring, the source of the Erd Tree, was shattered. Merica's offspring, demigods all, claimed the shards of the Elden Ring known as the Great Runes. The mad taint of their newfound strength triggered a war that meant the abandonment by the Greater Will. This war has led to many conflicts all across the lands between, and through conflict we are granted clarity. The first defense of Leyndell, a sovereign alliance rots from within. Traces yet remain of bloody conspiracy. One involved with this royal ruse was Godefroy. He and his army led the first assault on the capital, where he eventually failed and was captured. Spirit of Christoph, an honorable knight of Leyndell who was also a devout worshipper of the ancient dragons. His skills strike down foes with thunderbolts, the dragon's weapon of choice. After the first defense of Leyndell, Christoph earned the hero's honor of Erd Tree burial for the feat of capturing Godefroy the Grafted. Godefroy is locked within the Golden Lineage Everjail. The name of this prison isn't the only clue to his claim of the throne. His appearance is exact to one who we will discuss later, but for now let's tell of the talisman of which he holds dear. A legendary talisman depicting the Elden Lord Godfrey. Raises charge attack power of sorceries, incantations, and skills. Godfrey was a ferocious warrior. When he vowed to become a lord, he took the beast regent Serosh upon his back to suppress the ceaseless lust for battle that raged within. It is my belief that Godfrey taking upon Serosh is what would later be known as grafting. The difference being that Serosh subdued power, not elevated it. The relation between Godfrey and Godfrey is to be debated, but I believe that they are far removed. The dilution of blood and therefore power had led Godfrey to seek strength via any means necessary. Through the borrowed brawn of others he would have a better chance against his kin. However, it was both might and mischief that enabled his attack on the capital. His helping hand was Godric, who worked behind the walls and not against them. Golden veil of intricate design. When Godric was hounded from Leyndell, the royal capital, this was one of a multitude of treasures he took with him, also known as Marika's mischief. The inner walls of the capital show signs of damage, but no successful breach. In modern times the two attacks are layered events, meaning it is hard to discern what damage was done and when. Marika's mischief could have only been obtained by those already within the capital, as this treasure was targeted for being the tool of Godric's escape. Kenneth Haight, a character to be explored shortly, states that Godric hid himself amongst the women folk to flee from the capital, and what reason would women have to flee if it wasn't for war? Returning to Godfrey, it is not only his image, but also Arsenal that is replicated. His ability to conjure the currents suggests that he too once resided within Stormvale. There is no indication of the length of his occupation, but I believe he acquired it some time after Engvall died. Stood atop a torn temple is a rightful ruler, the self-proclaimed repudiator of the false, Kenneth Haight. Kenneth and his claims shall be investigated later, but for now let's listen to what he has to say on Godric.
Yes. Now allow me to furnish you with a little advice. I would take great care to avoid Godric's tarnished hunts were I in your shoes. That depraved lot are obsessed with sacrificing tarnished like you for the sake of grafting. Honestly, Godric's nothing more than a jumped-up country bumpkin. Lord? Oh, don't make me laugh.
A country bumpkin is a person from the countryside who is considered to be awkward or stupid. Within the lands between, the regions are not only represented via their lords and ladies, but also through accents. For example, those within Liurnia typically have a Welsh-sounding accent, and those within the southernmost part of the continent, Limgrave, have an English southern countryside-sounding accent, with Godric being one of those people. Kenneth is presumably a man of the capital, Leyndell, but his family roots may originate within Limgrave, hence his request to free Fort Haight from Godric's grasp. Godric, however, is not a man of the capital, but instead he would frequent it. It is my belief that Godric grew up outside the city walls and called the country his home. But where exactly was his home? That, I believe to have been Stormvale, and during this time Godfrey was its lord. As previously mentioned, Godfrey has the capabilities to control the currents, much like Godric. And also like Godric he held the title of Grafted. In modern times, Godric conducts tarnished hunts, where those captured are ripped limb from limb and placed upon a new master. But why are the tarnished targeted? Tarnished are the estranged kin to those that call the lands between home. When Godfrey was exiled he left the lands between and divested himself of kingship. Twice a man and once a god, Godfrey again took upon the name Horolu, becoming a simple warrior once more. Those who remained across the sea still carried gold within their veins. This lingering lineage is the power and potential to become Lord, hence why grace extended its guidance. In modern times it is only frail flakes of gold that are able to seek out the last remnants of the tarnished. This display of desperate frailty reflects the plight of power. Those with greater wills are reduced to beggars, and as beggars can't be choosers, there are only scraps that remain. However, this was not always the case. Tarnished have been coming into the lands between since the Round Table was formed long ago. If it was back then as it is now, then the point of arrival for these tarnished would have been the southernmost fringes of the continent. And if it was Godefroy who was Lord of the Storm during this time, then those who were his far-off family quickly became his foe. Through capture he sought to concentrate that which he was born without. The limbs of Lineage would tighten the grip of his claim to the crown. An arms race had begun. Retouching upon the chosen title of the southernmost region of the continent, perhaps it was during the time of Godefroy that the fringes became known as Limgrave. Godefroy began many things. If there was glory in grafting, then it was he who was mostly responsible for this practice, not Godric. There is nothing that Godric can call his own. He has either borrowed, stolen, or inherited. Within the story trailer of Elden Ring can be seen forces attacking the capital. These men are the same soldiers found within Limgrave. The battle shown I believe to be depicting the first assault of Leyndell, who Godefroy was responsible for. As we know, Godefroy was captured and Godric escaped. If indeed his twang dictates his territory, then this is how Godric knew to return to Stormvale upon the defeat. The remaining force of the failed attempt is who he took command over, and then quickly he claimed the castle as his own.
First, he hid himself amongst the womenfolk to flee the capital, then hid from Radahn in that castle. Then he insulted Malenia, lost to her in battle, only to lick her boots rather than die like a man. Has he no shame, the big girl's blouse? And to think, he's the blood of Godfrey, last of the golden lineage, though you almost wouldn't know it to look at him. Yeah, I almost feel sorry for the chap the more I think of it.
To fully comprehend Kenneth's comments on Godric, we will first start at the beginning. The importance of Godric being a country bumpkin we already have explored, and 2, his masquerading as fleeing women. Moving on, his hiding was the cause of conflict, to which Radahn responded. Positioned off of the southern Caelid cliffs is a small castle. In modern times, Redmane Castle serves as the gathering place for warriors who are wanting to participate in the Radahn festival. However, access wasn't so freely given before the rot ruined the Red General. What you may think are defenses were actually once the tools of a siege. These horses were halted and have been stabled here since they lost their masters. The conquered constructs contain relics relating to their former force. Resting against tables and hanging on the walls are tools used by those who have been banished or exiled. At the top of the tower 2 ladders are positioned, seemingly leading to nowhere. However, it is the one that managed to make it across and into the lion's den that reveals the intended purpose. The wooden wall can be lowered, creating a platform, but the attacking force failed to reach the foundations, so were left hopelessly suspended. Any who dared to jump would have no doubt been picked apart by the surrounding forces, and so defeat came quickly. Those who escaped fled from the lion's reach, but those who couldn't were caught, their necks snapped. Inside the fort are where the battered were broken, with their beaten banners put on display. These are the foot soldiers of Godric, acting as a warning, but also as evidence of their lord's presence. Radahn retaliated, marching his forces towards the Eye of the Storm. Found within an Alcadan camp, northeast of Agheel Lake, is a cookbook of an armorer which hints at this event. A record of crafting techniques left by an armorer who served the great General Radahn. Contains knowledge of dealing with rot, the application of fire in particular. Acquire the knowledge to craft the following: fire grease, drawstring fire grease, and fireproof dried liver. No doubt the entry to Stormvale was defended in a similar manner as to what can be found today. Nevertheless, Radahn's forces pushed their way up through the tunneled entrance, only to meet more resistance. The cobbled road that runs beneath an aching arch is where modern-day tarnished shall foresee a fell omen. Weapons of all kinds are firmly planted within the ground, being all that remain of extinguished ambition. But our interest isn't in the offensive, it is in the defensive. The wooden spiked defenses have been moved to the side, something only a collected effort could accomplish. The same slitted barricades within the castle are also positioned before the archway. Any who attacked would be funneled right up to this point and met with a steel-tipped bolt. However, it appears that this position was eventually won with the victory, being short-lived as more resistance was met, standing atop the castle walls. Rad'an's forces looked to flank the ramped road by maneuvering via the cliffs. Although steep, they managed to egress up the cliff, where the outer walls of the keep halted them once again. Not only is it the sheer size, but it is also the thickness of these walls that is to be admired. A ludicrous amount of explosive power would be needed to breach this brutal brick, with the logistics of carrying such dangerous cargo also being its own nightmare. The shape of this fracture does not match the ideal force, as the presumed powder would not pierce in such a precise and pinpoint manner. It is my belief that the damage you see was done by one who is not grounded by gravity. One of the glintstone sorceries that manipulates gravitational forces, pulls a clump of rocks from the earth and sends them flying. This sorcery can be cast while in motion, a gravitational technique studied by the young Rad'an. His master was an alabaster lord with skin of stone. Through this newly created entrance, the Redmanes yet again were met with dead ends and sheer cliffs. They continued to push and found another route leading down from the side of the ramped road. However, this path only led to familiar ground. In modern times, it is hardened old hands that guard the gate to the castle, and only thanks to a breach are we granted access into the keep. The other option is to ignore the warning of a one-armed gaunt and have the gates lifted, where death is quickly given. Stepping through the fissure, we are again met with a fortified face. However, thanks to more precise points of impact, we can traverse the dents with dexterity, reaching the adjacent cliffside. Only from afar can you comprehend the damage dealt to the storm. The porous profile leaks with a knotted nightmare, causing many to believe that the thorns are to blame. However, only when having entered can you discern pus from projectile. Meteoric impressions are left on the inner walls like a textured portrait, with the thickness of the fortress managing to preserve the internal organs. Continuing with the cliffside, it would appear that this was only as far as the lions could reach, as the scaffolding seen in modern times, I believe to have been put in place only after the assault has ceased, its intended purpose being primarily for repairs. Rad'an retreated back across the Tenebrae domain and into Caelid. Godric would have seen this not as a defeat, but as a victory. However, it was not he who won this battle, it was the ingenuity of his forefather that ensured his safety. The many layers of stone kept him caged, shielded from the general's jaws. Godric's deluded delight of victory is what I believe led him to insult Malenia. Found along Liurnia's northern highway is a memorial that reads, "This marks Malenia's southward march. The blade of Miquella and her clean wrought knights. Grant her wings never to be clipped." To reach Caelid, one must pass through Limgrave, and I believe that it was during this journey that Godric maligned Malenia. This insult led to the drawing of blood and blades, ending with a bent and begging knee. Godric the Golden, humiliated, having tasted defeat by the hands of the blade of Miquella, now on his knees, begging for mercy. Pity is what steadied the steel hand, and although his life was saved, it would be because of pity that he would come to be persecuted. After this defeat, Godric lost men, might and monarchy. This loss is what would lose him the title of Golden. Although he would still continue to claim gold, people would only perceive a fool.
And to think, he's the blood of Godfrey, last of the golden lineage, though you almost wouldn't know it to look at him. Yeah, I almost feel sorry for the chap the more I think of it.
The army that Godric inherited was a fraction of its size after the failed attempt on the capital, with its numbers being further reduced at a later date due to Malenia. To make up for this loss, he looked to hire fearless cell swords from the mountain tops. Helm worn by Caedan cell swords. These hulking, fearless mercenaries, said to hail from the mountaintops of the wintry north, are adept at fighting on horseback. Caedan is the name of their home settlement. These masters of horseback can be seen patrolling the roads of Limgrave, and are far more deadly than their golden comrades. Their weapons tell of their strength. This curved great sword wielded by the brawny cell swords of Caden combines the blades of a scimitar with the heft of a hatchet. A difficult-to-handle weapon that demands much of the wielder's strength and dexterity, but with practice and ability, it can serve as a versatile weapon, even on horseback. It was weakness that led Godric to seek the aid of others outside of his domain in an attempt to regain glory. And for crown and glory to be reclaimed, there are things which must be sacrificed. Hanging from the bridge of sacrifice can be seen 3 corpses. They are not civilians, they are foot soldiers. This same display can be witnessed once inside of Castle Morn, and I do not think that the misbegotten are responsible. As a foot soldier, your place is at the bottom, your labor is hard, and your rest infrequent. Across Limgrave it is only foot soldiers who are seen operating heavy machinery such as ballistas, whilst soldiers who display the colors of gold get to stand guard, a less strenuous task. This fear of weakness and failure has led Godric to work his army down to the bone. As punishment funnels its way down the chain of command, it would be those who are seen as disposable and most weak who would receive such punishments. For this reason many turned from their duties, the roads that they once defended, they now attacked. Men of their own making, but now masterless. Fortunately, there is a place for the downtrodden to trade duties. Mirkwater Cave is home to the untethered, where traitors are trained by a tarnished. A savvy soldier who is admired by many for his chivalrous and forthright spirit, exchanges graft for gruel.
I'm Patches. Patches the untethered. Tarnished like you, only free-spirited. Nomadic, you might say. Only for now, those retired soldiers turned bandits. And they're paying for my gruel. In exchange for my, well, showing them the ropes. They're all foot soldiers, survivors of a defeated army, worked to the bone by their high and mighty lord, only to be thrown out with the rubbish. It's the same old story everywhere I go. To hell with it all.
Returning to Castle Morn, there is no man which guards her entrance, as they have been slain. The only guardian is a golem, and it will attempt to stop any who trespass. Unlike the downtrodden, this construct cannot escape command. However, it was not built for the duty in which it now carries out. Its past is layered and all but forgotten. Great bow of black stone crafted by a civilization now gone to ruin. Weapon of the guardian golem. Extremely heavy, this great bow requires enormous strength just to draw, suggesting it was not designed for human use. This towering titan is no toy, but it can be controlled. They are seen all throughout the lands between, serving different deities. Godric uses them to guard what's most dear. The one at Castle Morn is not there for brick, but for brawn. And it is for this reason that Castellan Edgar cannot abandon his duty until the treasured sword is retrieved. However, the most precious of things is a ring, acting as an anchor in the Lord's heart. Because of this, several golems guard the road atop the bridge, leading to the divine. At the northernmost part of Limgrave there is a cave that houses a tomb deep within. Occupying this vault are some of the most vicious wildlife that can be encountered. Wolves, land octopuses and giant bats have made this hole their home, and have recently fought off fearsome thieves. Lying dead in the dark are the corpses of Caden. They were unable to reach the main chamber that holds the huge pillars built by people who are long gone. These structures are the same seen on Limgrave's coast that predate the Golden Grace. Their broken beauty is to be admired all across the lands between, as unlike the golems they did not find a new purpose, and so were left to rot and ruin. It is my belief that those responsible for such intricate archways are the same who built the mentioned golems, as it is one of these rusted relics that remains within this ruin. This golem was the objective given to the Caden. Perhaps Godric wished to find another protector for his sites of importance, or perhaps he wished to discover ways to better control the constructs. The fact that he gave this duty to the mercs, and not his men, speaks to what he must think of them. This task was of such significant importance that he turned the cheek to his own army and whispered to the wanderers. Another sign of the Lord's distrust is that none but birds, banished and exiled, safeguard Stormvale. They have been its protector since its founding within the fringes, and so for this reason they have remained. The numbers which inhabit Stormvale may have changed over the many years, with Godric perhaps again looking to acquire more numbers from outside his borders. However, it would seem that those of great rank and respect are able to frequent the fort, as it was a commander who was dispatched from the storm to stomp out and stop a disturbance. Kenneth Height is who we are already familiar with, so now let's carry out his request. But before we do, we shall inspect his surroundings. Kenneth is standing atop a fractured tile from a tempestuous temple. Below him lies a more modern demolishment. A group of demi-humans stand around a broken carriage and a murdered noble. This now deceased individual I believe to have been traveling with Kenneth, and their ambush is the reasons for Kenneth's announced need of rescue. The road in which they traveled upon leads through Mistwood, and it is on the forest borders where our given objective awaits. Traveling upon the overgrown road of the mist-ridden wood, you will encounter more demi-humans who have also been successful in their attacks. Continuing, once the haze has halted, you will come across more of the dead, who are still yet silent, but tell of a terrible tragedy. Approaching the fort, you will see wooden spiked defenses, lined with defeat. Embedded into dirt and flesh are ballista bolts fired from the high wall. Lying on the ground are demi-humans, unsuccessful in their revenge. Further up you will see the forces of Godric, standing watch over the entrance. Also accompanying them is a crazed warrior, who shall be explored later. Once within the walls, you see lying on the ground, a gigantic corpse. This is a mother of the demi-humans, her death wrought wrath. The one who spearheaded this defeat is the Knight Commander, who is situated at the top, overlooking his completed conquest. When approached, the claims of his bedevilment bear fruit, as the apple in his eye only sees blood. The attack in which he uses suggests his secret allegiance. Blood oath skill granted by the Lord of Blood. From a low stance, coat the blade in your own blood, to unleash a rending blood slash in a wide arc. The Lord of Blood is Moog, but I do not think he sought the commander, rather that the commander sought him. I take this to be further evidence of Godric's perceived weakness at the hands of others. Even those high within his ranks look elsewhere for power, their faith beginning to falter. Kenneth and his nobles managed to escape the onslaught, with the death of a queen causing her subjects to go into a frenzy. The lack of intelligence is common for these half-breeds, but even within a slaughter such as this, anyone might fail to discern friend from foe. It is my belief that the half-humans and Height came together to discuss peace. This talk was cut short as an attack soon came knocking. Kenneth was able to flee, with the demi-humans in tow, killing any who straggled, until it was only the Lord left. Once we've completed our objective and freed the fort from the grasp of the grafted, Kenneth has this to say on our victory.
Right then, time for me to head to the fort. I've much to do. First, I'll have to re-establish communication with the demi-humans. What's that look? You don't believe me? Well, under the Erd tree, commingling with the demi-humans is made possible. Even the vulgar shall not be left behind, under the rule of true order. Which is why I, Kenneth Height, next in line as the rightful ruler of Limgrave, have sworn to uphold it. Just you watch, my friend. Just you watch.
Are Kenneth's claims as the rightful ruler the reason for this targeted attack? I believe it to be so. However, there is more to this murder. Fort Height holds half of a treasure. If made full, the medallion allows access to a longed-for region. The left half of a split medallion depicting the Erd tree. Brandishing the medallion with both halves conjoined will activate the Grand Lift of Dectus, connecting the Altus Plateau to Leonia. The right half is said to reside in Fort Fareth in the Dragonbarrow, far to the east. Fort Fareth used to house the Guardians of Caelid, but its defenders have long fallen, now bound to the earth as hostile spirits. The only things truly living are winged women who sing of the shattering. Hanging from above are not just bats, but more battered and broken banners, the same that can be seen within Redmane Castle. These are the foot soldiers of the Golden Lineage. It would appear that Godric split his forces between Redmane Castle and Fort Fareth. the objective not only to conquer, but to also capture. As mentioned, this is where the other piece of the puzzle is kept, and so, that piece reads, right half of a split medallion depicting the Erdtree. Brandishing the medallion with both halves conjoined will activate the grand lift of Dectus, connecting the Altus Plateau to Liurnia. The left half is said to reside in the coastal fort height to the far west. Similar to height, the name Faraf may indicate who this fort once belonged to. How both families came to acquire the pieces of the medallion is to be speculated, but regardless, their treasure was worth the trouble of traitors. Godric's attempt to obtain passage into the capital does not stop there. The wanting to return home is also felt by his subjects, who were hounded along with their lord. Found within the Weeping Peninsula is a noble ghost who seeks to restore. This noble is directly facing the Tower of Return, and he is not the only one interested in its transporting abilities. Within the ruins of this tower, more of Godric's men can be encountered. Their objective is a chest that resides on the uppermost level. When opened, this chest transports the user into the inner walls of the capital, a place that both Godefroy and Godric were unsuccessful in breaching. The meddling of the medallions is what I believe led to the broken bridge that connects Limgrave to Liurnia. Seen on the side of the lakes is a carriage and its carrier. This is a lesser giant, also known as a troll. Within Liurnia, trolls too can be seen transporting carriages, and due to the position of the carriage and carrier, it appears that this troll attempted to cross from over the lakes to reach the grave. Positioned some meters away are the corpses of cuckoos and nobles, who presumably died by the troll's enraged hand. Furthermore, the Dectus lift is located within Liurnia, and here can be found more mad knights. The cuckoos and their catapults are not defending against any who may descend down from the Dectus lift, rather that they are defending against any who may approach it. It is my belief that they are positioned in such a manner as to intercept any who may wish to access the Altus Plateau. Only those who carry both halves of the medallion can activate the lift, and so here the cuckoos are positioned ready and willing to pry it from the hands they hold. I believed that this position was only taken once the bridge was blown, as all other options were now not available. The item within the carriage is a tree spear, something of high value, but not of needed worth. I think this to be a trade of an agreed upon item, the left half of the Dectus medallion. The damage dealt to the bridge was catastrophic, removing not only the road, but also the supporting foundations. As we know, the left half of the medallion is located within fort height, but that is not the reason for our return. Found within this fort is fireworks, highly explosive and very deadly. The same marked munitions are seen within Stormvale, at a much greater quantity. These I believe to be responsible for the destruction. Godric set up a trap to hold the advances of the cuckoos. It is also my belief that this incident happened some time after Melania returned from Caelid in the arms of her savior. The broken pieces of the torn temple are littered throughout Limgrave, and it is around the concrete cairns we see attempts of excavation. Here south of Agheel Lake, a Caedan Cell sword patrols the road on horseback, whilst nobles are seen digging at the foot of graves. Situated up the disjointed tomb, we see the same practice being carried out until we come across an encampment. The entrance of this encampment has been fortified, with it also being guarded, this speaking to its importance. Here, overlooked by Godric's men, are more nobles frantically digging through the dirt. The relics of ruination tell us of the importance of such sites. Stone fragment found near places where ruins have fallen from the sky can be used for crafting or simply for throwing at enemies. These shards of stone are believed to have once been part of a temple in the sky. They glow with a faint light from within. Not only fragments, but stone can be obtained from sites such as this. The sanctuary stone reads, a rare piece of stone fragment found near places where ruins have fallen from the sky. Material used for crafting items. It feeds and strengthens the light as it shines. These stones can be dropped by crazed warriors upon their defeat, and here within the camp there is a scroll that links the crazed with the scholar. Sorcery scroll of the Carian royal family, the heads of the Academy of Ryu Lucaria. can be given to a learned sorcerer to gain access to the following sorceries: Glintblade Phalanx and Carrion Slicer. The closest learned sorcerer to this location is Selen. Her projection resides within the Waypoint ruins north of the encampment. However, an audience with the witch cannot be granted until the keeper has been cared for. This being a mad pumpkin head. The helmet on their head is said to be pitch black inside, keeping the crazed warrior within from panicking. They are known to be driven mad when agitated by bloodshed and are all that remain of a broken gladiator. The mad men work in tandem with the grafted Lord's army, but do not think they are free. They are sorry souls who are made to serve the lords and ladies of the lands between. As we know, one can be witnessed at Fort Height, with one also being seen within Castle Morn. And there is yet another free of his charge, but not of his madness, on Saints Bridge. The one within the Waypoint ruins I do not think to be serving Selen, rather that, like the others, he is also under Godric's command. The camp in which the Royal House scroll was found is populated by nobles learned in the academic arts. And it is a description of Ash that tells us why they lack a headstone crown. Ashen remains in which spirits yet dwell, used to summon the spirit of a noble sorcerer. Spirit of a nobleman who once asked to be given a place at Raya Lucaria to learn glintstone sorceries. His talents were insufficient to be worthy of donning the stone crown, however, and he is only capable of using the most rudimentary sorcery. It is my belief that Godric wishes his nobleman to better learn the ancient arts through the wretched witch. This is because no other option is available now that the bridge has been blown. All nobles have their allegiances depending on what region you find them in. As we know, the nobles who were hounded along with their lord only wish to regain access to the capital, and so for this reason the ones who remain cannot be granted safe passage into Liurnia. Even if those of the grafted were to brave the cliffside, the academy has its gates closed and is not accepting visitors. A place that is also not welcome to the new is the stranded graveyard. This is where today's tarnished shall awaken, if fallen from the precipice. A ghost of a commoner tells of learning and remembrance, and that to acquire the lost arts of our people, we must first take the plunge. Doing so will place you within the cave of knowledge, and here the hunters seek. Open and upturned graves litter the surroundings, with their former inhabitants scattered. The ones responsible are men of Godric, overlooked by his soldiers. The barrels and boxes indicate that this excavation into the pit of the past is not recent. So, the question remains, what are they searching for? Once conquered, knowledge leads to repetition as you find yourself overlooking familiar ground. The deceased corpse seen atop the ledge carries a message. When interacted with, you shall receive strength, the very thing that Godric lacks. But it does not end there. Similar to the dig sites up above on the open ground, Godric seeks salvation via the past. Powerful relics he wishes to obtain to help him in his current endeavor. The reason for the disturbance within the Cave of Knowledge is because I believe they search for a stone sword key. Obtaining 2 of these will grant one access into the Fringe Folk Hero's grave, a place that we are already familiar with. Deep within is a hidden chamber which I believe holds more of Marika's maidens. The item to be obtained is the Erd Tree's favor, which displays Queen Marika and her offering. But this cannot so easily be taken. As once crossed, scions shall descend. They sit quietly, clinging to the ceilings, and on the ceiling is how they came to enter this sacred chamber. Once the crypt has been conquered, the first step into your journey shall be greeted by a pale face. This is White Mask Vare, his attire revealing his occupation. A talisman depicting a dagger and a surgeon enhances critical hits. The white-garbed field surgeons come to the aid of friend and foe alike by dealing a final deadly thrust to spare them from the prolonged agony of a mortal wound. A sense of mercy is a catalyst for bloodlust. The dagger depicted is the Misery Cord, and this can be found within Stormvale. It is my belief that this once belonged to Vare, with his former residence being the reason as to how he knows of the current events within the keep.
Worse yet, I hear old Godric's acquired a ferocious new toy to graft. So, prepare for the worst.
The dragon seen within the inner courtyard has been freshly felled. It remains intact and in relatively good condition. And it is here that Godric can be seen, admiring the dangling drake.
Mighty dragon, thou'rt a true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Deliver me unto greater heights.
This beast I do not believe to have been felled by the Lord's hand, rather that its impalement came as an accident. This accident was the cause of an incident, which scars the castle walls. There's a type of damage which I have neglected to mention up until now, and I do not think it to be caused by meteoric impacts. The claw-like impressions are of a dragon's doing. There is also other damage that is too catastrophic when compared to the peppered profile of the outer walls. Radahn's effort did reach the inner court, but even the biggest boulders do not match up to the complete disintegration of the outlining walls. The impressions matched with the total destruction could only be caused by the mother of all dragons, whose sunken slumber looms like a mountain. The elder dragon is positioned within the eastern regions of the Dragon Barrow, and behind her sits Fort Fereth, the location of the right half of the Dectus Medallion.
Challenge Godric the Grafted, Lord of Stormvale, to acquire a great rune. Decrepit he may be, but a demigod he remains, and of course, an inheritor of a great rune.
To inherit is to receive, and so who gifted Godric this great rune? I believe it to be Godefroy, as upon him being captured, Godric was the last in line worthy enough to receive such a bounty. I do not think this be physically gifted between the two, rather that when Godric fled from the failed attempt to seize control over the capital, the rune and the storm were his to inherit. The names of those who are descended from the golden god show the dilution and diminishment in the importance of their family name. Whilst others may ignore and scoff at their perceived importance, the ones who hold the light of lineage do show respect to their brothers in arms. Godric is confirmed to be but a distant relation to Queen Merica and the runt of the litter. Even so, the Lesser Lord holds his hero in his heart. His image and indeed physique is all but an attempt to match the might of Godfrey. His head is crowned and his hair braided, with his shoulder carrying the aged counselor, except this is only a mere depiction that has been pulled from its pole. Here in the courtyard he's infatuated with the fallen. The power and prestige of the dragons is something he longs for. Wyverns need not worry like mere men, masters of the sky, conjurers of fire, their flight to be feared. He looks to return home, for that is where he believes he belongs. A kid of the country whose roots run to the tall tree, a tree that would not have bloomed if it wasn't for his family. He looks for gratitude, but grace would see him abandoned. He bears a heavy weight, so sought to increase his carry. Living in the shadows of his forefather, he desperately clings for power. But even with this many hands, power still slips through his fingers. His forces fail him, his punishment brutal. His pawns pan through the ruins of old, overlooked by paid protectors. Those loyal look elsewhere, their allegiance written in blood. His actions mocked, but secretly pitied. Godric sacrificed himself and those around him for his dream. But dreams aren't always destiny, so it's best for him to sleep eternally. This video has taken more time than expected, so I hope you are happy with the effort. A follow-up video will be released containing further observations of Limgrave, and where theories will be further explored. If there was a connection that you found loose or unmentioned, then your answers may be found there. Originally, the appendix was going to be included within this video, but it did not match the storied format in which the script was written, hence the decision to remove it. On the topic of theories, allow the observations and connections to inspire your own ideas. Do not take anything presented within this video as fact. Those with attentive ears will know that this is not the voice of Eredin. This is because this video has been brought to you by Maze Man. I am known within Eredin's community and the people's favorite. If you wish to join the Erudites on Discord, a link will be in the description. You can support the channel by becoming a YouTube member or via Patreon. You will find the links within the pinned comment. If you wish, you can make a one-time donation through the YouTube tip feature. This also enables your comment to stand out above the rest, so if you have a thought or theory that you'd like to share, then this improves its chances of being seen. If you enjoyed this video, then please check out Eredin's other works. This video was only possible due to the in-depth lore through of Elden Ring, so I hope he sees some of you there. He also streams on Twitch, where he discusses Soulsborne lore and other games. On the topic of Twitch, Eredin shall be streaming 2 hours after this goes live, so pop in and say hi. A special thank you to the patrons and YouTube members for keeping the flame lit and the Estus filled. And finally, a thank you to all. So, fellow Tarnished, I bid you a farewell, and that I will see you in the next one.